Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to News and Views with Dr. Moby and Vicky. How are you doing, Vicky?
Hi, thank you, Dr. Moby, for having me again. It's such a wonderful time to be able to be connected to you. And good news are coming up from America. The situation of the pandemic, it seems that it is controlled. And thank you once again for all these healthcare workers, especially to you and all your workers and co-colleagues all over the world. Thank you, Dr. Moby.
Thank you for appreciating, and that is true. We are seeing finally good results with hard work and so forth, and prayers, a lot of prayers. We are seeing a decline in COVID, and basically to all healthcare workers, frontline workers, and everybody, and a lot of lives, of course, lost more than 500. So, it is a sad day, but I think we see light at the end of the tunnel, and I think a lot of people feel relief, at least to see the light, So I think still people need to do their work, and they need to be very careful with it, because it can bite us in the end, if we are not careful, which means get your vaccine and take care of your loved ones. That is very important. And so thank you, Vicky, once again for coming all the way from the other part of the world. And we had a great feedback for the last one. And let's catch up with the top of the news. So which one we're going to start with? The first Taiwan news on Taiwan, right?
Yeah. Dr. Moby, today I would like to report to you and your viewers and listeners who are tuning in 4 articles that I've selected that I thought is very meaningful to show the significance and the context that it reflects on that country, and also it could be adapted and reflected upon many, many economies throughout the world. So the first article we've got is from Focus Taiwan and English News from Taiwan that I've selected because it dovetails to what I have spoken last week. And the headline is Taiwan and Indonesia to discuss new migrant worker policy again. And Taiwan and Indonesia are scheduled to hold a round of talks to resolve a new policy on workers' fees. I would like to explain this to the context of the American viewers and some of these listeners and viewers from Europe. And probably it could be new to a lot of us, and even to some of these news. It is new to myself, as you discover new layers of economies, new layers that goes deeper and deeper that which is not so connected to a lot of us. So in this particular news about Taiwan, and it says that the policymakers of Taiwan and Indonesia are coming together for a fresh round of negotiation on fees imposed by Taiwan to import migrant workers from Indonesia. And of course, these fees will go to alleviate burdens on the workers, but the burdens will shift to the employers in Taiwan, and the fees will go to cover visa fees, health checks, airfares, transportation, and accommodation in Taiwan. And this is going on in Singapore too, as Indonesia is negotiating with a lot of countries, as said in the news, with all these importing countries. And if you see that, and this will exist throughout the world as there are imbalances in economic strength, whereas third world countries export their workers to developing and developed workers, whereby these developing countries like Taiwan, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, they need cheaper workers to support their industries in terms of construction, medical, hygiene, cleanliness. So and these are the jobs that the locals do not want to do. And also these are the jobs that are expensive, and it creates a cost to that particular industry. And what we see the news right now from Taiwan, which is also reflexive of Singapore and many countries, as long as there is an imbalance of economic strength, we will continue to see these issues, and it will never ever go away. We will never. A buyer will always go to the cheapest supplier. We will always go to the cheapest place whereby we can bring in services or products. And this is one of the news that is going on in Indonesia as they negotiate with Taiwan the fees, placement fees to be paid to the Indonesian government to cover all these insurance costs, visa, etc. And I would think that this is one of the good moves from Indonesia, and we can see that the Indonesian government is also trying to negotiate for domestic maids also, that as they export domestic maids to Hong Kong, to Singapore, to Taiwan and many countries, they are trying to have this negotiating power as they try to improve the lives of the migrant workers. And you know that the migrant workers do not have a voice, but yet, you know, in an economic sense, there is always employers from the developing and developing countries that want to negotiate downward the prices of these placement fees, because it becomes a burden to the employers, and then a burden that will be passed on to consumers in the developing countries. I mean, it is a political issue, but it is a humanitarian issue that will not go away. Dr. Moby, this is the news of Taiwan, and it will not never go away as we see negotiations from different countries. And I think in a lot of countries, even for India and Bangladesh, as they export their millions and millions of workers throughout the world, and these migrant workers are really voices. We do need to see that, you know, their lives are improved and not be exploited throughout the world. Dr. Moby? Yeah, we can look at the next news that is about South Korea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 1 second. Let me put that in. Okay.
The next news about South Korea, Dr. Moby, as you're pulling out the article, this is really a reflection on what's happening to the booming e-commerce economy in Asia. And this article is from insider.com. It says that exhaustion and punishing hours and few job protections have led to the deaths of 17 delivery workers in South Korea. And if you look at the news, Dr. Moby and listeners and the viewers, it really talks about this worker who has migrated from a provincial city, that means it's from the rural cities, the suburbs, to the capital of Seoul to work as a migrant worker in this pandemic economy when jobs are few and companies are closing down. So you have a lot of these internal migrant workers from the suburbs going to the bigger cities to work as a migrant worker in the e-commerce industry that is booming across in Asia and probably in America and Europe also, as people use the technology and they buy online every day. So in this particular news, Lee, the worker here, he works as a contract worker of the e-commerce giant Coupon Corporation, and he works in the city of Seoul, and he actually rents a little room in the city of Seoul. And what is important that we see in this article is that workers like him go from a less rich town to a richer town to look for jobs, which is also symptomatic of what we talked about earlier in the news, whereby migrant workers are actually going from developing or less developed countries going to more developed countries. And this is an internal situation that is happening in South Korea. And this Mr. Lee, his body was found in the rented room. as
Oh
his
my.
wife tries to call the police, and they say that he was found to be unresponsive and dead in his room due to overwork. And if Dr. Moby and some of your viewers have keep track of some of these news that is coming out from South Korea, and this isn't the first news that reports the death of 17 workers. Some weeks ago, it is reported that another fresh graduate that has a degree in robotic science couldn't find a job in Seoul. He actually worked as a delivery worker in Seoul, and we're talking about Seoul, one of the biggest economy in Asia, and the graduates aren't able to look for the job within their domain of competence. And one of these 25-year-old worker in another news article was also found dead and unresponsive in his home. He was a robotic science graduate who couldn't find a job in robotic science in the pandemic economy, and the parents actually saw him working over 12-hour punishing hours of the day throughout these months of the pandemic era. So we're talking about in Asia in this e-commerce booming at times whereby people are in lockdown, and the only jobs we find are actually just delivery drivers, truck drivers who are delivering, and it is a worrying sign because delivery drivers, delivery workers, like in Singapore, they aren't protected under the labor law. They are just seen as contract workers with little insurance, with little benefits, and yet they are being paid by the gig. And I would like to talk to Dr. Moby about this is reflexive of something that I read a lot about what's happening in the world right now for the new millennium industry is that we're talking about something that's called the gig economy, GIG. The gig economy is reflexive even in pre-pandemic times because of the world is going into jobs that are of no that are of shorter nature, they are of contract. They do not employ you for the long term, and we're looking at graduates coming out into the world, competing very rigorously on the platform of the world for jobs that are one job opening you will probably see thousands and thousands of applications for a job in a local economy and even internationally as we go on globalization. So this is just another symptom of workers going unprotected in the gig economy, and it also goes to show that newer job seekers from fresh graduates, they probably have very little option as compared to our father's time, whereby when you have a job, you probably be employed for the rest of your life in the job, and you've got this social mobility to go up the ladder as the company grows. But in the very uncertain times, post-pandemic, as I see, companies are facing distress. Companies are facing uncertain times. There is no guarantee for your job. So we're going to see a wave of new kinds of jobs that is going to come, which is called the gig economy. And that gives very little insurance. And I'm using it in a loose manner, figuratively speaking, insurance to your lifestyle. You've got a job today, but it may be gone next year. So people are always constantly on the move and on the lookout. And what impact does it have on the millennials and the millennial post-pandemic economy? As I read some of these studies that talks about the gig economy, workers, employees, graduates who are coming out to look for jobs because of the gig economy that doesn't give them a long-term social mobility of career planning because they don't know how long they're going to be in the job, and they have to be constantly looking for new gigs and new jobs. It shows that they cannot plan for their families. They cannot plan for getting long-term housing. They cannot plan for long-term commitment in health insurance. They cannot plan for a career that will see them through to growth. So we're looking at the different times in the 1980s, 1990s, and even in the 2000, where the world is moving on to globalization, when the world is expanding. So in post-pandemic times, economies are getting very uncertain. There will be a new wave of jobs in the gig economy that makes people feel uncertain about long-term plans for their lives and their future. And also, we will have a lot of challenges in alleviating poverty in many underdeveloping countries and developing countries. We're really talking about Africa, Asia, whereby billions of people are still trying to struggle to go from poverty to above the poverty line. So, post-pandemic era, like what we're seeing now in Seoul, one of the largest economy in the world, and this is happening. I think it's scary, Dr. Moby. We're talking about things that is unseen and that is beyond politicians, that is going to be a wave that is going to be uncertain on from the macro economic sense. Dr. Moby, this is the second news that I'm going to bring to you. The third news is from Singapore. Singapore is an island, ladies and gentlemen. Like what I always say, people forget. I mean, it's a brand that goes beyond its name. It's a name that really goes beyond its size. We are a little island that is just over 700 square kilometers small. And you're looking at a video here that we are building solar power, solar panels on the sea in our coast because we are running short of land.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about this is a place that we aren't able to negotiate land from our neighbors because we are just surrounded by oceans and water. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we are not a little a country that is located in a continent. We are an island by itself. So the only way to expand for an island is either upwards vertical growth that you see. We have got a vertical concrete jungle, or you see now that we are expanding outwards onto the land. And climate change is a huge issue. And I championed climate change about 15 years ago in my career as I talked about climate change, which is so new in this part of the world, in Asia, because in Asia, we're talking about alleviating poverty. We're talking about education, healthcare, environmental issues is really at the bottom of the list in all countries in growing Asia. But we cannot ignore the issue of climate change in countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore, because the capital of Indonesia in Jakarta and also in Singapore, we are seeing floods when it rains. It means that it is a significant rising sea level because water cannot be displaced out into the ocean as it rains. So it fills up. So we are investing. We have placed about $100 billion in the next years and the next generation for mitigation of climate change effects in Singapore. For example, building dikes around the island to stop rising sea level, and we have got experts from Holland that comes in to talk about how to build dikes, and we're talking about billions and billions of dollars from taxpayers that is just going out to infrastructure of climate change, and we are not talking about a big country. We're talking about a small little island that has direct effect of climate change. And if there are climate change deniers, I'm going to say, please come to Singapore. And look at the effects of flooding. And not only that, I would think that mitigation of, like, for example, CO2 emission, which is number one in the world, because, we're looking at greenhouse effects of the temperature that becomes unstable in different parts of the world. Either it goes to extreme temperatures or it becomes global warming in different parts of the world. And as the Arctic melts, the ice melts, the sea level in Singapore, in this part of the globe, is going to rise. We can't run anywhere because there is no inland for us to migrate. So we are looking at real situations in the world, and especially for climate change. And we are actually trying to reduce our CO2 emission by using renewable energy, where you saw in the video. We are trying to build as much as possible solar panels on top of the buildings and solar panels in the ocean to mitigate CO2 emission from burning of fossil fuels. But Dr. Moby, Singapore is just a drop in the huge ocean we're talking about.
Hey, I want to ask you, Vicky, these solar panels, I saw they put a horizontal over water, but it's going to restrict the water. What about making vertical, straight up, solar panels, building, floating in the sea?
In the air.
Yeah, rather than horizontal.
In the water. There are two things. I mean, number one, Dr. Moby, if we're talking about a huge country, if you're talking about Malaysia, Indonesia, there are lots of land. There are lots of land that can be cleared, and plains that can be cleared for solar panels on the ground. And you can see that's happening in America. Not only they've got solar, they've got wind power in Europe, in America, even growing solar renewable energy in Africa, places where there are sufficient land. But in Singapore, most land are like, now I'm in an apartment, it builds upwards, and the only area that you can build upwards for solar are at the rooftops. So if there are there are some experiments that we are trying to build solar panels at the rooftop, but the effort that goes into that little panel that goes on top of the rooftop doesn't make a lot of mitigation in terms of energy for the rest of the people living in that building. So it doesn't make any ratio, a proportion in terms of mitigating energy usage and mitigating CO2 emissions. So the only place is really to go outwards, and the outwards of Singapore is really just the waters. So it's unique, I guess. I thought it's illuminating and interesting for the rest of the world, especially to explain climate change effects using Singapore as a case study of rising sea level, which is really real, and also talk about energy consumption and CO2 emission.
Okay.
So that's third news. And finally, we've got a news for Dr. Moby and your viewers and listeners. It is the news on Japan. 11th of March is actually, we see 11th of March as the 10th anniversary of the tsunami that swept into Japan. And of course, I've got friends who live in Japan. It's something that is historical. And we're here in this video that reminds us about that immense power of a tsunami that ripples into inland, that has killed thousands and thousands of workers. And if you've seen news from the last week and this week in this anniversary, people are revisiting their loved ones who cannot be found and are lost forever in this tsunami. And they are heartbreaking stories. And here we're talking about a country of Japan. It's an island in the rim of fire of the earthquake, and we see throughout the history of Japan, and even in Los Angeles, San Francisco, you are really staying in that rim of fire, where that is where the plates of the earth do move and they do meet. So here we're looking at a video where Japanese, very well trained about tsunami. There is a siren that sounds about 15 minutes using the technologies of Japan to actually sense an earthquake that is in the ocean miles and miles away. And they are given minutes, I think about 10 minutes, more than 10 minutes, 12 minutes for that siren to sound in all these coastal areas for people to quickly go highland. And here we're talking about a huge discipline of population. And they've got this a network of loudspeakers that actually booms out. And this is a real situation whereby Japanese announcement, central announcement that says evacuate quickly to go highland because a tsunami is coming. And we can see that there are actually 4 breakwaters. And this is one of the rare videos that I've seen when I looked at Japan tsunami throughout the years. This is something that I just saw that it goes to remind ourselves we should never underestimate nature, the power of nature. For example, climate change, an earthquake, a tsunami. People comes in as one. They don't care who we are. So we're looking at the wave that is coming in that has actually gone beyond the first breakwater, and it looks really small. But the Japanese know in their trainings, in the Japanese culture, they learn to run below the table in schools where children are being taught about earthquakes and tsunamis. So you will see this wave coming in that says a huge tsunami is coming, and people are actually running upward in the hill. And this video is being played on top of a hill. And of course, at the end of the video, you see the people on top of the hill and helping other people to quickly come up the hill. And let's take a look closer as it breaks over the first breakwater wall. And then it will quickly go to the second breakwater wall, and then the third breakwater wall, and then the fourth breakwater. It's just huge, and it's just sends chills down your spine, Dr. Moby. Let's take a look. So as we are taking a look at the tsunami, let me report also about the other double whammy facing Japan. That is the Fukushima nuclear station. Let's take a look. The water now that is breaking from the first, second, and now it's gone beyond the third. Now it looks really small because we are looking from a video that is really far. But look, this is the fourth breakwater we're talking about. You can see the fourth breakwater is so high up there, and you can see the road below the car, and you can see almost the wall is 4 meters high as the cars are traveling. And we're looking at the waters that this is the first wave, Dr. Moby. We're looking at the first wave, and the first wave is already crashing to the fourth wall already. Wow. And this is the immense amount of water, and the cars are really below that breakwater, and the water is going beyond the fourth wall of the breakwater. Look, Dr. Moby, this is the first tsunami that comes, and it has crossed over the fourth water over the embankment onto the roads there. I pray that the people has left, and you will hear whispers from beyond the video that they hope that the children have left, and they hope that children have left the city. Look at this immense power of the tsunami, Dr. Moby. It has crushed. It has crushed. And we're talking about very stoic Japanese people that they say, hell is here. Hell is coming. Dr. Moby, this is just immense. I mean, as I watch this again and again, and all this, there's no words to describe how the Japanese have suffered earthquakes and tsunamis throughout their whole history. And this is not the end. A second wave of tsunami is coming in the next few minutes. And as we commemorate, ladies and gentlemen, the 10th anniversary of the tsunami, we're looking at more tsunami that is coming, that is going to sweep the people out, and houses out, and as it crashes, even collapses all the concrete buildings. So, Dr. Moby, 30 minutes of news for you as we commemorate and wish all the best to our Japanese fellow global citizens in the world, as many people are mourning about families, people who aren't found um, uh, and disappeared in this tsunami. All these blessing to Japan, and also we're talking about Fukushima, another situation where um, Fukushima, the nuclear plant, for 10 years they've been trying to build all these radiation water that fills up the many of these water tankers. But the latest news that I've read a couple of weeks ago, they aren't able to hold these billions and billions of tonnage of radiation water anymore. They have decided to release out the radiation into the waters. So I'm not quite sure what news comes up from there. It seems that there's very little news about Fukushima plant, but the Japanese government have decided to release the radiated water from the Fukushima plant into the sea. And I think this is going to be another environmental disaster. And if I've got more news on that, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Moby, I will share with people about the radiation water that's going to be released out into the ocean. Thank you, Dr. Moby. These 4 news for you, Dr. Moby.
Yeah, that is, oh my God, excellent coverage, and what a thorough, report you presented. Thank you for educating all of us, and God bless you. You're doing phenomenal work, and keep up the good work. Thank you, Vicky, once again for coming. And
thank you, Dr. Moby. Let us just wish humanity cross over the chasm of the pandemic safely in 2021, and all the best to you, the listeners and the viewers. From sunny Singapore, you can see the sun is shining. Thank you. Bye. See you next
bye.
week.
Take care. Bye bye.